You're listening to a download from the outdoorstation.co.uk.
Number 351.
Hello and welcome back to the Outdoor Station on podcast number 351. Yes, there's been a bit of a gap between 350 and 351, and we've crawled and dragged our way back in front of the recording machines to bring this to you. And I can't really give you a list of any of the reasons why there's been a bit of a delay. I've been spending a few moments jotting down on paper a series of excuses. I think you're entitled to excuses why you haven't had any regular information from us. And it's just a handful of things, really. It's been obviously a fairly wet and long and dreary summer, and we've been able to get out and do very much, or it's been very hard to make plans. And the other thing is we seem to have been dogged by various illness this year, which has sort of curtailed the enthusiasm in getting out and doing any recordings. But I'm hoping to rectify that in some way in the near future and get back to more regular releases for our ever faithful listeners. In the meantime, I hope you've caught up with Sinead over on the Calendar Road. We do like to support Sinead because she presents the outdoors world with a beautiful pace and an Irish lilt, and describes very gently the changes in the season from month to month from her base in Southern Ireland. Now, talking about getting out and about, listeners will remember my last big day out with Andy, which was December, I think it was late December 2011, where we happened to pick the worst possible day to do it. But we went to the heart of the Brecons in a massive storm, and I cooked up a 3-course Christmas meal for him. If you look back on in the archives, you'll see it not so long ago, and many people have commented just how much pleasure they got from having an audience with us while we had this experience. Well, Andy has promised faithfully from that moment onwards that he would organise the next one, and he's threatened that this should be down in Dartmoor. Well, sadly, obviously time has moved on now, and we're still not any closer to it. Supposedly it's going to be a Christmas thing by all accounts. I spoke to him the other day on the phone, and he threatened it was going to be a Christmas do, and we were going to be down on Dartmoor, no doubt experiencing a similar adventure. So if you're regular readers of his blog site, Andy Howell or Must Be This Way, do drop a note from time to time just to remind him that you're waiting for him to do some planning. And he's not a great planner, you see. That's the real reason behind it. Right, okay, what I thought I'd do is have a look at two aspects that are facing us at the moment as outdoors people. On one hand, we have technology and software and new releases in the format of ebooks, and on the other, we have the good old-fashioned, solid, reliable hard copy of a decent map and all that entails. Andy is going to take his iPad and load up one of the Cicerone ebooks to give you an idea of what it's like to have an ebook on an iPad, how it compares to a real book, and the sort of information you can get from it and how to interact with the iPad to see if that helps you plan any of your future adventures. I, on the other hand, have taken a visit recently just down the road to a lovely little village in the heart of Worcestershire here called Upton upon Severn. Now, Upton was founded many, many years ago at 897 AD, and during the Battle of Worcester, or the preparation for the Battle of Worcester in 1651, some unfortunate individual left a couple of planks across the old broken-down bridge, and as many as 12,000 troops, parliamentary troops, led by Oliver Cromwell, managed to make their way across the river and prepare for the Battle of Worcester the following day. These days, though, sadly, Upton has got a bit of a reputation for flooding rather badly. As I say, obviously it's on the Severn, or River Severn itself, and became famous internationally in 2000 and 2007, virtually being marooned as an island. However, having said that, right in the middle of the very small high street is a lovely little bricks and mortar property, and entitled The Map Shop. And the Map Shop sells, would you believe, maps. And that's all they sell. So it's quite a fascinating place, and it's been there for some time. John Baker is one of the partners of the Map Shop, and he starts off by giving us a little bit of history.
Well, the shop has been in existence over 30 years. It's based in Upton-on-Severn, which is very rural, simply because it was an offshoot of a surveying business. And the guy who started the business was a surveyor by trade, found he'd got some space, some time, and started selling maps more or less as a hobby. And from there it grew and grew. The maps took over, and he thought, why am I going out in the rain? I'm going to stay in the shop and sell maps. And that was where we came from.
And it's been going for 30 years?
Yeah, over 30 years. It's always been primarily, should we say, a mail order business. In the old days it was letters and telephone calls, and now it's primarily, I guess, an internet business, which is the way everything's going, understandably. And it does mean we have a wider access to the worldwide community. We always had some international trading, but we find there's a lot more now than there's ever been.
So what's the trend been from a purchaser's point of view over the last sort of 20, 30 years? As a sort of a general observation, how have trends changed in people's interest in maps?
We've always had a strong core with the, shall we say, the traditional walkers, cyclists, climbers, that side of the business. The advent of cheap air flights, we had a terrific boost then because people were taking more holidays, short breaks. Short breaks simply to go climbing or walking. And so for a time we had a terrific upsurge. As the supposed cheap flights have become more expensive, I think that's a change in attitude there, certainly.
And I notice you also do, obviously, a range of guidebooks and information books and so on. Has that gradually increased over the years? And again, has there been a trend at all in those?
If anything, the guidebook sales have decreased over the years. I think that is somewhere where technology is having an effect, simply because more and more information is available online. And if you're going somewhere for the weekend, whereas you might have bought a guidebook, quite honestly now you'll simply download a bit of information just to see you through those couple of days. Not quite the same impact on maps, I think, because there are fewer actual detailed maps available online.
The map ranges that you have as you walk into the shop here is vast. I think most people who are perhaps in the UK will assume that it's the range of Ordnance Survey maps and the various scales. But when you actually look around the shop, you cover, well, every continent, every country, I presume, of a printed map, which is fascinating. But, with the years of experience you've got, when you look at the range of detail each type of map producer creates. Obviously, I tend to enthuse over Ordnance Survey because I think they're just superb. But how do they compare? How do the different maps of the world, different producers, how do they all compare with each other?
Good question. In the UK, we always think of Ordnance Survey as being the best maps in the world.
De facto, yeah.
I'm not sure that's strictly true. I think it's just that we are so familiar with them. We look at a French map, a Swiss map, and we think, well, it isn't quite an Ordnance Survey map. But in reality, many countries have mapping of comparable to standard to Ordnance Survey, but we're just not familiar with it. And you've got to use them for a few days to get your eye in and think, that's what it's telling me. Because it tells you the same thing, slightly different way, but it's the same thing.
Yeah.
It is a fact that Ordnance Survey aren't the best in the world.
Well, that's interesting to hear because, as you say, I mean, when the times I've been, I don't know, where I've used maps, probably Australia, New Zealand, over in Europe as well. As you say, it takes a few days to decipher almost the style of them, really. The way that what's important to them is slightly different to, I suppose, what would be important to me when I'm looking at an Ordnance Survey. Does it tend to be sort of walkers, outdoors people generally that pick these maps up for foreign areas, or are there people surveying the land or surveying their sort of landscape for some other reason?
Mainly outdoor enthusiasts. You get some interest from geologists who obviously are using the topo maps in addition to geological maps because they need that overview of the landscape. But it's primarily the outdoor enthusiasts, walkers, cyclists, climbers want to access routes to peaks and so on. The trekking market is quite strong. Surprisingly, in these sort of times of economic hardship, it's interesting how people who have hobbies find money for their hobbies, which is good news for us.
Obviously, now everything's becoming digital, and that's got to be affecting all marketplaces, and I'm sure it affects yours as well. There's a variety of digital mapping software, but there are other facilities that you offer which digital maps in their current format and the software can't offer. Am I correct in saying that?
There are a number of software programs out there. There's some mapping available digitally for use on your home computer. In fact, when you start searching across the world, it's not as wide-ranging as you might expect it to be. Yes, if you want a route planning map or a street map, then that's relatively straightforward. But if you actually want to get a topo map, these tend to be fairly well guarded by the mapping agencies, simply because it is a major source of revenue for them, and they're a bit reluctant to spread it too widely into the free world of the internet. Where we have seen the biggest change in all this is undoubtedly with street plans, road atlases, and certainly street plan sales have fallen through the floor. Although many people still keep a road atlas in the car just in case they have a disaster with the GPS or with the sat-nav, they tend to hold a much lower value road atlas. Beyond that, Ordnance Survey, being extremely commercial, far more commercial than just about any other worldwide publisher, have made more of their mapping free to use. They haven't put their most valuable data sets into this range of mapping, and using that we are able to produce site-centred maps for pretty much anywhere in the UK. At different scales, we're also able to produce historic maps site-centred for pretty much anywhere in the UK.
If I can just stop you there and just explain what site-centred is, because people might understand that.
That's simply putting your area of interest at the heart of the map, which does mean you don't always have to buy 2 or 3 maps to cover an area. You can sometimes create what you want on one single sheet of paper, which is often more convenient, not necessarily more economic, but certainly more convenient.
But sometimes, though, I mean, there are areas, particularly in the UK, where the OS map sort of slightly overlaps, and you put 3 or 4 maps together, and there's only a very small area which just overlaps, and usually that's the bit you want the information on. So when you say somebody just phones you and gives you the either grid reference or the location, do you produce a full-sized map or just a very small A4 print?
No, that's a full-sized map. If you think an Ordnance Survey map at present costs around about £8, a centred map, giving the same size sheet, but a centred map will cost you around about £15. So it's equivalent to about 2 maps.
But it could save you, obviously, a considerable amount of cutting maps up, as it were, just to get one area overlap.
Indeed, and in many cases, if you want a presentation map to go on the wall, let's say, sell quite a lot of people who've got holiday cottages, want to put a walking map up on the wall, and it's ideal for that purpose. And it's always more convenient to have 1 piece of paper than 3 when you're out in the high wind on the tops.
Absolutely. Now, you said about the historical maps as well. I didn't realise you did that. Tell me a bit more about those.
Yeah, the Ordnance Survey have made their historic database fairly accessible, and a number of internet-based companies have taken that on board and created products where you can do exactly the same thing and pick up your area of interest going back to, say, the 1880s, 1900s, and create a map based on that. What we can do is produce a full-size map based on that rather than just the A3 or A4 extract you might better print off on your home computer.
Right. And how far back does that history go? Is it back to the original mapping?
It goes back to Ordnance Survey first edition, so if you were talking about 1-inch maps, you're talking about 1830s. If you're talking about the very detailed mapping that shows individual properties, then that's 1880s.
Gosh, that's interesting. Worth knowing. What's worth knowing? Coming back to the boundaries, what are the boundaries that you actually can offer? You cover from a custom printed point of view, a centred map. Just purely the UK area. Purely
the UK, yes. The IGN in France are the only other people I know of who produce a consumer product, but they only do it through their website. They don't put it out through any agencies. So it's a matter of going onto the French website and creating what you want.
Over the years, you must have had some interesting phone calls and people seeking maps for certain types of expeditions or whatever. Anything spring to mind as being either the most unusual or the most interesting?
The only thing that springs immediately to mind, we did quite a bit of work with Pen Hadow when he was doing some work exploring the ice core depths in the Arctic, and we supplied quite a lot of mapping for that expedition, which went on for some months. It tends to be perhaps the more obscure areas where we do get asked for things. Every year we do quite a good trade for the Mongol Rally, which is the sort of charity drive to Mongolia, and every year we're inundated with requests for that. People trying to find their way through Russia and China, which is always quite entertaining. We meet some bizarre people on that one.
With the advent of I suppose, software, maps and GPS systems and everything integrating together, what's the longevity? Where's the life of a paper map going, do you think?
My view is that it's still very important. I know that many of us do now use GPSs when we're out walking. Loads and loads of us use sat-navs in the cars. But where, to my mind, they tend to fail is the overview of the area. You can say you're going to get in the car and you're going to drive from one end of the country to the other. Turn your sat-nav off and off you go. But you could drive past landmarks, physical features, mountains, lakes, and never know they're there. The other problem I have with sat-navs is that you follow them and you can't actually remember where you've been. So the next time you come to do the journey, you have to turn the sat-nav on again.
Do you think it's a generational thing about the sort of age range of people you actually have coming into the shop buying maps and also the whole software thing?
I think there is a slight problem in that people now tend to rely more on their GPS, certainly among the younger generation when they're out walking. You do still need a map. A GPS is great. It tells you exactly where you are. It'll tell you how to get back to where you started from, but it won't tell you what's in between, which is sometimes fatal. We all know, I'm sure we've all heard of people walking off the edge of mountains, and many years ago, Ordnance Survey had to withdraw a map for that very point of view.
Oh, really?
It was on Ben Nevis, and somebody took a bearing and just walked straight off the edge of the mountain because they didn't actually think about how they'd got to get down. They just took a straight line.
For people around the world then listening to this, wanting more information about countries and so on, are there many people like you around the world, independent shops that concentrate solely on delivering this topographic information?
Not greatly. Certainly, if you think about the Americas, there are very, very few. Within Europe, you'll find there are a lot in Germany, and there's quite a few in the Low Countries, Netherlands and Belgium. I mean, I think in Germany it's because there are an awful lot of map publishers. Unlike this country, where Ordnance Survey pretty much dominate the map market, Germany, because they don't have a strong national survey, you've got a lot of independent publishers, which is actually quite healthy. If you think in this country, really, there's only Ordnance Survey and Harvest, and after that you're struggling to find a map publisher. Now in Germany, you've got dozens. I think it's the all-powerful Ordnance Survey have actually killed off that side of the market.
Wasn't there something else with Ordnance Survey, that the fact that it's publicly funded, that we actually own the data that's there and trying to sell it back to us or something? There was some sort of argument politically going on over the last few years?
Ordnance Survey is, although it's effectively a public body, it is self-funding. So the data, although some of the data is classed as being free to use for everybody, they do still have to make a profit, and that's part of the deal. So they cannot make everything free. So the data sets they made free to use for web developers and so on tended to be the more straightforward ones, and other areas which are, should we say, their most lucrative sectors, they were very reluctant to lose.
Just perhaps a bit of a low-ball question. What would you like to see develop in the mapping world? You've been in the business a long time, and you've obviously seen a lot of interest from different areas come and go. With the development of maps themselves, how could you see they could either be improved or enhanced?
In many cases, better paper quality. That would be a terrific step forward. More people are now printing on waterproof papers such as Tyvek, but there's still an awful lot of maps you buy which simply disintegrate. And although, yes, we want to carry on selling you a replacement map, there's nothing worse than when you're out in the rain and the thing just falls to pieces. And I think that would be a big step forward. A lot more maps are now, shall we say, printed digitally, and clearly not printed on the old sort of four-colour printing presses. And I think there has been some deterioration in map legibility because of that. And we do get occasional complaints about this. And when you look across different publishers, you can sort of see what's happening.
I certainly myself, I've got a bit of software which I use occasionally for local use, and I find that when I've printed it out, the topographic information just isn't clear enough. Or it's my age, one of the two. But certainly on a windy day when it's raining, it just doesn't seem as clear as a quality OS map that I've got in front of me.
Yeah, I think that's true, definitely, and certainly, I was talking to somebody a couple of days ago. The Norwegians have just introduced a whole new series of 1 to 50,000 topo maps to replace their original national series, and already people are moaning about these, that the clarity is not quite the same. And when you look at those, yes, you can see what they mean, and clearly they've been printed in a slightly different manner, probably plotted.
Right.
Probably on a very expensive plotter, but still plotted rather than printed, and there is a difference.
So your overseas customers, then, is there an area that you specifically have more customers in, or is it generally scattered evenly across the world? I mean, and if they want to contact you, of course, do you welcome their contact via phone or email? How does it work for you?
Well, we have contacts from all over the world by all different methods, quite honestly. Not strangely, I guess it's understandable. Our strongest overseas area is Scandinavia. We get a lot of orders from Scandinavia, but whether that is simply because they're part of the English-speaking world, right. Very much so with Scandinavia.
Upton is a beautiful little black and white town right beside the river here, which obviously has had the reputation, sadly, of flooding a few times, which I trust you haven't been affected, especially with all this paper in the shop.
Only slightly.
But over the years, I suppose, as people, is the footfall reducing and the internet interest increasing?
Yeah, definitely. If you go back 20 years, on a Saturday morning, you really couldn't get round the shop for the number of people. But of course, now everything is on our website. Then, unless people really want to handle the stuff, they can simply go on the web and order, and that tends to be what happens. In many cases, they might ring us up first, or ring us up after they've looked on the web and say, "Can you tell me a bit about the map? What does it look like? How does it compare to Ordnance Survey or a French IGN map that they're familiar with?" So that works well, and we're always happy to talk to people. There are some internet dealers who simply won't talk to you, but we're not in that vein at all. Always happy to hear from you. And
the centred maps, if somebody wanted their own map printed with a certain centre, is that something they can organise on the internet, or do they have to speak to you directly for that?
No, they can organise it on the internet. Sometimes it's better to talk, because if you want to know how far the extents of the map are reaching, it's easier for us just to call it up on the computer and say, well, the west's there, the east's there, and so on, and that just clarifies it. Because the big danger is that somebody asks for a centred map with a coastal town, and then end up with a lot of water.
You're listening to theoutdoorstation.co.uk. Award-winning producers of podcasts to inform, inspire and entertain lovers of the great outdoors everywhere.
As John mentions, the website, themapshop.co.uk, contains all the information to make any orders for maps for the UK and anywhere else around the world. And of course, the centred map service is probably of quite a lot of interest to people who are doing unusual trips around the UK, where they might find 2 or 3 maps overlapping, and actually having a centred map where you want it to be could be very useful. I've certainly found it very useful in the past with something like the TGO Challenge, where I've had 2 or 3 maps overlap. Now, we're going from the hard copy to the soft copy, and Andy is going to switch on his iPad and take us through the alternative, a Cicerone ebook, and explain all it contains.
Yes, thank you, Bob. It's been a while since we've had a regular feature on books, and I thought I'd start a new series by having a look at how ebooks are now beginning to have a big impact on the outdoor guidebook market. Now, many of us, of course, have become familiar with ebooks over the last few years through the use of Amazon's Kindle and other readers, but ebooks as guidebooks, how does that work? The market leaders in this field are our old friends Cicerone Books. based in the English Lake District, and who produce a quality range of guidebooks that's now almost global in its scope. And for a while now, Cicerone have produced all of their new titles in an ebook format alongside the printed version. They've been doing this using Adobe's digital edition software, which has the advantage on a computer of being genuinely cross-platform. So I can download the software and I can read my books on a Mac, on a PC, on a desktop or a laptop machine. But I don't know about you, I've never found reading a book on a computer screen a particularly pleasant or intuitive thing to do. It doesn't really work for me. But I sat up and took notice last year when Cicerone produced their iPad app. Anyone who's used the iPad will know that it's a stunningly effective machine for the presentation of mixed media, text, graphics, photographs, highlight boxes, maps and so on. And so in this podcast I'm going to take a closer look at the software, and I'm going to be comparing two guidebook titles and having a look at how the e-version compares with the more conventional printed book version. So let's get going. The first thing that we have to do is to download the app itself, and as you would imagine, this is available from the Apple iTunes Store. It's a free download and it installs itself in the usual way. There's also a version for the iPhone and the iPod Touch available, but we're going to concentrate on the iPad version today. So I'll click on the icon and up comes a very simple screen. Listed in front of me are all of the ebooks that I have available, and the first time that I load up this program, it will prompt me for details of my Cicerone account. If you don't have an account, it's very easy to set one up the first time you visit the Cicerone shop. And there's a couple of buttons here. One takes me directly to the shop and another takes me to the Cicerone catalogue, and that's a catalogue of all of the printed books and the ebooks as well. So I'm going to look at two titles today. The first is the Cicerone Guide to the Stevenson Trail, written by Alan Castle. And this is a long-distance footpath that starts in the Massif Central in the middle of France and winds its way south to the Cevennes Mountains just above the Med. And the second book is one of the new World Mountain Range series, and this is Scotland by Chris Townsend. Let's start with the Stevenson Trail book. This is a typical Cicerone pocketbook guide. It's sized so that it slips into the pocket of a rucksack. It has a tough laminated cover, and inside there's a very comprehensive introduction with details of travel, accommodation, local culture, wildlife and so on. And that's followed by a series of detailed day itineraries, illustrated with a series of stunning photographs, very effective highlight boxes, some tables, and some very effective maps and elevation maps as well. It's a quality offering, all that you'd expect from Cicerone. So let's take a look at the e-version. So I just tap on the book. The first thing that I notice is that I've got a very faithful representation of the book page, but the iPad page is slightly bigger than the book page, which is useful. If I double tap on the text, it zooms in. The text is even bigger, and I can move around the page using a finger. And although I've zoomed in, it has still preserved the two-column format of the guidebook. To navigate the book, I simply tap on the right-hand side of the page, and that flicks me forward a page, or on the left-hand side of the page, and that takes me back. And there's a contents button in the top right-hand corner, so I'll click that. And up comes a pop-up window with details of all of the chapters. So I'll click on Introduction. Yep, and that takes me to the same introduction we were looking at a moment or so ago. Stunning text, very, very clear, lovely photographs and so on. So it's a very faithful representation of the guidebook. And for home use, I found myself turning more frequently to the iPad version of this book than I have to the printed book. However, there are limitations in this format and some frustrations in using it, and we can see these more closely when we look at our second book. the World Mountain Range series are in effect reference books. This book has over 500 pages of detailed information about almost every aspect of the Scottish Highlands, and it's the perfect tool for anyone planning an excursion or a trek in the Highlands. I'm using it at the moment to plan 2 trips to Scotland this summer. So if I take this book and open it up, I see the same quality layout than I saw in the Pocket Guide. Indeed, these books should have won awards for their design if they haven't already. They're wonderful books to use. Being reference books, you want to use them in your own individual way. I've got bookmarks in mine. In some sections I've highlighted bits of the text with a highlighter pen, and in others I've made annotations in the margins. It's a very well thumbed book. So let's have a look at the ebook equivalent. The first thing that I notice is that the page size on the iPad is a little smaller than in the printed book. However, it's very crisp, very clear, and of course I can just double tap on the text to zoom in. So there's not really a problem there. Where things start getting difficult is when I want to start to annotate the text and to navigate. So unlike a PDF, I can't highlight the text and I can't make my own annotations, and I can't input in my own bookmarks either. The next set of problems come when we look at navigation, and the best way to show you that is to click on the Contents button. This brings up the sections, and I'll go to the index at the back. I've got in front of me now a honest representation of one of the pages of the index of the book. With an ebook, I think a lot of people would expect these days to be able to click on a number and be taken straight to that page, and you can't do that with this system. Indeed, there's not even a pop-up box where you can type the page number in. So let's find a mountain that we know. Here's Ben Macdui. Now, there are 10 entries for Ben Macdui here. But again, I can't click on one of these numbers and to be taken straight there. The only way that I can navigate this book is by using the Contents section. So if I click on the Contents bar again, I happen to know that Ben Macdui is in the Cairngorms. So I click on the Cairngorms, and up comes the summary to this chapter, which is a fabulously designed front piece that gives me details of low-level walks, summit walks, scrambles, rock climbs, winter climbs, ski touring options, and so on. And then there's a detailed contents section, and if I just flick over the page, there's Ben Macdui and the Cairngorm Plateau, page 281, but again I can't tap on that and be taken straight there. I'm on, at the moment, about page 241, and to get to page 281 I've literally just got to tap on the right hand column of the page until I get there. It's certainly not as fast or not as intuitive as skimming through a book, and a bit clunky. I've got to another feature that is a bit of a disadvantage as well. I've got in front of me a map, and this is vertically aligned. With the book, you just flip the book over and look at the map, but with the iPad, if I flick it over, the whole thing reorientates itself. Now, you can turn rotation off in the iPad, but again, it's a bit clunky. So this is a bit more limited, I think, and in reality I find myself turning more to the printed version of this book than to the e-version. However, there are some advantages to having this book on my iPad, and that's to do with another iPad application. I also have on this machine a mapping program, and that has the whole of Scotland mapped at a 1 to 50,000 scale. In front of me in the book is a section on the Minigag, which is a long-distance trail, Old Drove route that links Blair Athol and Kinusey. If I want to have a look at that in the maps, I simply just double-tap, go to the mapping software, which is searchable, and I can type in Minigag, and it'll take me straight there. And once I've done that, it's very easy to toggle between the two. And if you're sitting at home maybe having a cup of coffee, sitting in an easy chair, it's certainly easier to toggle between the book and the maps on the iPad than it is to struggle with the unfolding of a full OS map on a coffee table. Getting hold of the ebooks is pretty straightforward. You just simply visit the Cicerone website and look at their online store. You can do that using your iPad, or you can do it on a desktop machine. And there you'll find details of each book in the Cicerone catalogue. If we go to the Cicerone website, we can have a look, for example, at the Scotland book page. And here we've got a description, the contents, the introduction, and a sample route. In the same way you can find with every Cicerone book. And we can buy the book in either the printed book format or the digital book format. Now, both cost the same at the moment. They both cost £25. And I think some people would expect the digital ebook to be a little bit cheaper. But I guess Cicerone have incurred quite a lot of cost in developing this system. Nevertheless, I'd expect the ebook price to drop a little over the next year or so. However, if you buy both books together, both formats together, you'll make a saving of £12.50 over the individual sale prices. And a lot of hikers are telling me they're doing just that. They're buying both the ebook and the print book, and they have the best of both worlds. They have a book they can read on their iPad, maybe when they're commuting to work, and then they have a pocketbook guide that they can take with them when they venture out onto the hills. But I should finish by pointing out there's actually a third option to consider. And that was brought to my attention by Jonathan Williams, the MD of Cicerone Books recently. He was telling me that he increasingly uses Cicerone Books on the Amazon Kindle, purchased through the Amazon store. Now, the Kindle is a grayscale monochrome device, so it doesn't have the glorious display that the iPad has. But it's a much lighter package, and it has a long battery life. And it might be ideal, for example, if you're doing a hut-to-hut holiday. Jonathan tells me that if he's going to the Alps, he'll put all of his guidebooks onto his Kindle and carry them around with him. And although he doesn't have the colour display, he's got all of the hard facts and information that he needs at his fingertips. The only drawback with this is that a Kindle purchase is a dedicated purchase through the Amazon store. So if you wanted perhaps an iPad version to look at home, and then you wanted a Kindle version to take with you, you'd still have to buy them as separate products. However way you look at it, I think Cicerone should be congratulated for delving into the world of ebooks so thoroughly and so quickly. They produced a quality offer which, while they might have limitations at the moment, I think give us a flavour of what's to come. And it will be interesting to see how the ebook offer develops, particularly as new authoring tools such as Apple's iBooks Author become more readily available. But at the moment, you have the choice. So go and have a look at the Cicerone website and make your own mind up. As ever, Cicerone can be found at www.cicerone.co.uk. I'll be back soon with some more features on books and some more conventional book reviews. In the meantime, take care and happy hiking.
If you have any feedback, questions or suggestions, why not drop us a line either on Facebook or directly to our email address info@theoutdoorstation.co.uk.
The home of UK-based audio and video podcasts for outdoors people everywhere.
So that pretty well wraps up this podcast. My thanks to John Baker from The Map Shop, to Andy for his review of a Cicerone ebook. Andy has done a series of book interviews which I will be releasing shortly, along with a few other interviews which I'm compiling at the moment. So until next time, folks, I hope the weather is treating you well, you are inspired to get out and about, and if you're not, then hopefully the contents of this podcast will inspire you to do a little research and get hold of a map or two and do some planning for a decent walk when the weather is on our side. So until next time, folks, take care out there, and bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To hear more from our extensive free library, please visit the website at theoutdoorstation.co.uk, the home of UK-based audio and video podcasts for outdoors people everywhere.